Absolutely not, Agatha Raisin snapped, though no one had asked her anything yet. The WI hall, packed with women sorting boxes of dubious donations, froze just long enough for Mrs. Josephs to pin up her lurid poster with exaggerated triumph. The poster proclaimed Carsely Winter Charity Auction, organiser PC Bill Wong, in letters that had the smug look of people pleased with themselves. Agatha stared at it as if personally betrayed. She had rehearsed her acceptance speech for the role all morning. "That," she declared, stabbing a finger toward the poster, "is a mistake of catastrophic proportions. Bill is gentle, calm, and therefore utterly unfit for crowd control. He'll be trampled before we reach the biscuit table." The WI ladies exchanged one of those collective smiles that implied they'd already discussed this and found Agatha's objections predictable. Mrs. Joseph smoothed the poster with relish. "The committee felt Bill would bring a nice, sensible tone." Agatha bristled. "Sensible? At a Carsely auction? We'll be lucky if the vicar doesn't break out in a bidding war." A small paw appeared from the gap in her handbag, tapping the air with pointed disapproval. Hodge had been smuggled in after Agatha realized she'd forgotten to feed him, a fact she blamed entirely on the WI's unreasonable scheduling. He peered out with the disdain of a creature who considered village politics beneath him. The hall looked its usual chaotic self, crates filled with chipped china, bundles of knitted horrors, and enough old paperbacks to fuel a bonfire. The women bustled in determined knots, arguing over starting bids and whether Mrs. Hardy's sponge cake should be listed as artisan. The atmosphere had all the cosy fuss of pre-winter preparations without any of the serenity. Doris Simpson emerged from behind a stack of VHS tapes. "Well, Bill did cycle through yesterday," she said cheerfully. "Looked a bit rushed, mind you." Mrs. Bloxby, who had been folding tablecloths with serene efficiency, looked up. "Oh, I haven't seen him since Tuesday. He seemed rather preoccupied then." Agatha's irritation sharpened. "Preoccupied? With what? He never mentioned anything to me." She tried to sound casual, but the edge betrayed her. Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. "He had a small slip of paper, and he kept staring at it as if it was something he wasn't meant to see." Agatha's head lifted. Did he now? She reached into her handbag to stroke Hodge for effect, but Hodge batted her finger away. Even her own cat refused comfort when she needed it. A sudden flourish of perfume and silk scarf swept into the hall. Roy Silver, electric as usual, burst through the door. "Darlings, has anyone heard? Bill has been whisked away by a glamorous mystery woman, or possibly a scandalous one, or maybe both." Agatha groaned. Roy, for heaven's sake. But the WI ladies perked up immediately. Gossip, even unreliable, outranked table setting. Roy plopped into a folding chair, crossing his legs with theatrical flair. "I heard in Evesham. A woman in a red coat. Or was it blue? Well, a coat at any rate. Bill and she were talking very intensely." "That means nothing," Agatha snapped. "Bill talks intensely when giving directions to the lavatory." Mrs. Josephs tutted. "No need to be snide, Agatha. Bill is perfectly capable of organising the auction." "Is he?" Agatha whipped out her mobile. No, not mobile, she reminded herself impatiently. Landline habits were still a force of nature. She marched to the hall telephone instead and dialed Bill's number. The phone rang and rang and rang. No answer. She hung up with more force than necessary. She looked around, trying to appear unconcerned. "He's probably off interviewing someone, or pretending to work to avoid you lot." Mrs. Bloxby gave her a gentle, probing look that made Agatha feel exposed. "Perhaps he's simply busy," she said kindly, "though it isn't like Bill to ignore calls." "No, it isn't," Agatha admitted, more sharply than intended. She covered it by barking, "Roy! Stop leaning against that trestle table, it's wobbling." Roy lifted his hands. "I'm merely adding glamour. This room needs it." Doris stepped forward. "Agatha, love, if you're that worried, why not pop over to his cottage?" Agatha stiffened. "I'm not worried. I'm irritated. Entirely different." But the truth prickled like a woolen jumper. Bill never ignored her calls, not even when she rang to rant about the WI or her hair dye going wrong. The WI resumed its fussing, though with far more interest in eavesdropping. Mrs. Josephs continued pinning up posters at heroic angles, ensuring Agatha couldn't miss the title. Organiser, PC Bill Wong. The humiliation stung afresh. She tried calling Bill again. Still nothing. Roy leaned over her shoulder. Maybe he eloped. "Oh, shut up," Agatha hissed. The room had shifted. The chatter now skirted around the possibility that Bill truly hadn't been around. Doris insisted she saw him cycling. Mrs. Bloxby maintained her midweek sighting was the last. No one seemed particularly alarmed. They spoke as if Bill might simply drift through the door at any moment, apologizing for being late. Agatha alone felt the creeping unease. She refused to show it. "He's fine," she said too loudly. "Probably buried under paperwork." Mrs. Bloxby's gentle voice floated over the clatter of teacups. "He did look troubled, Agatha. That slip of paper, he folded it very quickly when I approached, almost guiltily." Agatha swallowed. "Did he now? And you're telling me this only today?" "I wasn't sure it was important," Mrs. Bloxby said calmly. "Sometimes we read too much into small things." Agatha did not appreciate being told she was overreacting, especially when she was, but only slightly. Roy leaned in conspiratorially. "Agatha, darling, maybe Bill is on some secret mission. Something thrilling, something terribly dangerous. He's a village policeman, Roy, not James Bond." "Everyone starts somewhere." Agatha ignored him and dialed again. Still no answer. The silence on the other end felt pointed, deliberate. Her stomach tightened. The WI noise carried on behind her. Someone knocked over a box of porcelain. Someone else complained about the smell of mothballs. It was the chaotic normality of Carsely. And yet Bill was not here, and Bill should be here. One of the women asked, "Agatha, dear, are we still using last year's bidding paddles?" "Use whatever you like," Agatha muttered, distracted. "Bill will sort it." Then she caught herself. "Will he?" She returned to the poster and stared at it again. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the glossy paper, hair freshly dyed, face alert but uncertain. She hated looking uncertain. Mrs. Bloxby approached quietly. "Perhaps check his cottage, Agatha, just to ease your mind." "My mind doesn't need easing," Agatha said, though her voice lacked heat. "I merely dislike incompetence." "Of course," Mrs. Bloxby replied gently. Agatha lifted her chin, but the bravado faltered. Bill had been missing from the village far longer than anyone realized, and nobody seemed remotely worried except her. She scooped up her handbag. Hodge poked his head out, blinking at the hall as if unimpressed by human foolishness. His whiskers twitched, sensing her tension. "Come on, Hodge," Agatha murmured. "Someone has to take this seriously." Hodge yawned with regal disinterest, but she felt oddly steadied by his presence. She marched toward the door, leaving the WI ladies to their tat and their posters. Behind her, Roy called, "If you find a beautiful woman hiding him, tell her I want fashion tips." Agatha didn't dignify that with a response. Outside, she paused. The quiet lane seemed too ordinary for something to be wrong, and yet the thought lodged itself stubbornly. Bill had vanished from Carsely, and she was the only one who noticed. She exhaled, annoyed at her own worry. "Honestly," she muttered, "he'd better not be doing something stupid." Hodge gave a small, sympathetic chirp from the handbag, as if agreeing that men were a nuisance. Agatha set her jaw and strode off. Whatever Bill had got himself into, she would find out, and heaven help him when she did. At home, the kettle clicked as it cooled, left over from her rushed morning. Hodge leapt onto the counter, stretching with the smug air of a creature who assumed she'd make time for him now. Agatha stroked his head absently, feeling the faint tremor of unease return. Bill Wong was missing, and it seemed she was the only one bothered enough to notice. "Useless lot," Agatha muttered as she marched into her cottage, slamming the door hard enough to make Hodge's water bowl tremble. She kicked off her shoes, one skidding under the radiator, and dumped her handbag on the table. Hodge appeared immediately, tail aloft, clearly prepared to inspect the scene for negligence. He sniffed a crumb on the counter with judgment that could blister paint. "Oh, stop looking at me like that," Agatha snapped, though she stroked his head all the same. "If Bill has vanished, I'll be the only one to notice. Typical." The kitchen offered its usual blend of warmth and mild disaster. A couple of unwashed mugs huddled by the sink. The radio burbled faintly about parish notices, vegetable competitions, and Doris Simpson's triumphant scones. Agatha glared at it, turned the volume down, and reached for the phone. She dialed Mercester Police Station with the righteous fury of someone who had been insulted twice before breakfast. The desk sergeant answered with the unhelpful cheerfulness of a man comfortable in bureaucracy. PC Wong? Likely on leave, Mrs. Raisin. He is not likely anything, Agatha said sharply. He hasn't answered his phone. Well, that's leave for you. Agatha made a strangled sound. Listen to me. Bill doesn't ignore calls, not mine. I'm sure he's perfectly fine, madam. Don't madam me, she hissed. But the sergeant had already adopted the tone of a man who intended to remain polite until she went away. She slammed the phone down and immediately regretted giving him the satisfaction. Hodge leapt onto a chair and sat like a stern supervisor. Agatha glared at him. Don't start. Someone in this village ought to care that Bill has evaporated. She grabbed the phone again and dialed Charles. He answered on the 5th ring, sounding half asleep and wholly unbothered. Agatha, darling, if this is about the auction again, it's about Bill. That is about the auction. Charles, he's missing. Nonsense. He's probably avoiding the WI, sensible chap. Agatha hung up mid-sentence. If Charles were here, she would have thrown her shoe at him. Possibly both. The cottage felt too small for her agitation. She stormed to the back window. Outside, the garden lay still under a crisp, dry afternoon, sunlight threading through the shrubs in soft gold. Not a hint of drama, which infuriated her. How dare nature stay calm when she wasn't? She stuffed Hodge into his carrier. He protested with a series of offended chirps and marched out, determined to prove the entire village wrong. If Bill had disappeared, she would find him, and if he hadn't, she would throttle him for making her look foolish. Bill's cottage sat halfway down Lilac Lane, modest and annoyingly tidy. His bike was gone, curtains open, nothing out of place, which somehow made everything feel wrong. Agatha knocked. No answer. She knocked harder. Silence. Mrs. Frobisher's door swung open opposite. She peered out like a nosy meerkat wrapped in wool. Looking for Bill, dear? Yes, Agatha snapped. Have you seen him? Oh, Wednesday morning, very early. Looked distressed, dear, but that might just be the wind. It was rather sharp. Agatha blinked. The wind does not make someone look distressed. Mrs. Frobisher considered this. Well, it makes me look distressed. Never mind that. Anything else? Mrs. Frobisher leaned closer. There was a man by the hedge the night before. Grey coat. Didn't recognize him. I told Fred we were about to be burgled, but Fred said I was dramatic. Agatha straightened. A grey coat? Yes. Stood there a good 10 minutes, then wandered off like he'd forgotten something. She paused thoughtfully. Or stolen it. Agatha didn't appreciate the fiction, but she appreciated the detail. She thanked Mrs. Frobisher in a tone that made the woman retreat quickly indoors. Turning back to Bill's door, she crouched and inspected the doormat. It was faint, but the marks were there. Dark, oily scuffs, unlike Bill's usual clean soles. She touched one with a gloved fingertip, frowning. An unfamiliar shoe tread. A detail that prickled. Inside the window, she could just make out a neat little stack of library books near the hallway table. Their titles were half visible. Techniques in missing persons investigations, patterns of disappearance, search protocols for small communities. Her heart thumped unpleasantly. Was Bill researching vanishings because he planned to, or because someone else had? She leaned closer. The due date slips peeked out. Overdue, of course. Trust Bill to commit a library crime before a real one. Idiot, she muttered. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? The jealousy surprised her, though she hid it quickly. Bill had always told her everything, or nearly everything. Had he found a new confidant, a prettier one, a younger one? Some woman in Mercester with glossy hair and sensible shoes? Oh, stop it, she told herself sharply. You sound deranged. Still, the thought clung like burrs on wool. If Bill had been troubled, why hadn't he come to her? She paced outside the cottage, agitation rising. Hodge watched from the carrier like a judge observing a guilty defendant. Fine, Agatha snapped. You're right. We're going inside. She circled the cottage, testing windows, all locked. Bill was irritatingly responsible. She returned to the front, hands on hips. Bill Wong, she muttered, if you've run off to chase some woman who likes tidying and herbal teas, I will personally drag you back. But the fear remained. Peeled back, beneath her irritation and vanity, was something raw, the idea he might be in trouble, real trouble, and she, of all people, wouldn't have known. She rang the police station again. The same desk sergeant answered. It's still Mrs. Raisin, she said. Has Bill reported in? No, madam. Has anyone seen him? No, madam. Does this not strike you as worrying? Absolutely not, madam. Agatha slammed the phone down so hard the bell rattled. She marched to the end of the lane, scanning the hedges. Grey coat. Who wore grey coats? Everyone in winter. Useless thought. Unless the man had returned. Unless he'd come for Bill again. Unless... No, she said aloud. No kidnapping nonsense. This is Carsely, not a crime novel. But the oily marks, the missing bike, the curtained window, they overlapped like pieces of a jigsaw she didn't want. She walked back to Bill's door and pressed her palm against the wood. Cool. Still. Hodge meowed from inside the carrier, demanding action or food or both. You're right, she said. Standing here accomplishes nothing. She took one more look at the cottage, then turned sharply and strode home. Her mind refused to quiet. Bill leaving early, looking distressed, a grey-coated stranger lurking, that slip of paper he'd stared at, Bill ignoring her calls. It layered into a pattern she didn't like. Inside her cottage again, she set Hodge free. He strutted to his bowl, tail flicking pointedly. Agatha filled it with mechanical efficiency, her thoughts elsewhere. In the corner, the kettle clicked, cooling after its earlier boil. Agatha stood listening to it, arms folded, trying to summon her old certainty. She had solved plenty of matters the police had bungled. She would find Bill too, but the truth gnawed. She was rattled and jealous. Jealous that Bill might have confided in someone else. Foolish, she told herself. Entirely foolish. She lit a cigarette, not dramatically, but for steadiness, and watched the thin curl drift toward the ceiling. If you're in trouble, she muttered, I'll find you. I just hope you're not doing anything idiotic. Hodge leapt onto the table, pawing at the newspaper until it lay properly aligned. He settled with a satisfied sigh, as if ensuring at least one thing in the house was in order. Agatha sat opposite him, tapping ash into a saucer. I suppose you agree, she said. Men are impossible. Hodge blinked, slow and regal. She reached to stroke him, and the small domestic warmth eased her worry only slightly. Bill Wong was missing, and for reasons she didn't care to examine closely, she minded rather a lot. Don't you dare tell me to calm down, Agatha snapped at a startled Labrador as she strode across Carsely's village green. The dog retreated behind its owner, who murmured something about poor Agatha having one of her mornings. Agatha lifted her chin. She had not slept well, thanks to Bill's absurd disappearance and the village's equally absurd indifference. The green buzzed with Saturday bustle. Stalls selling homemade chutneys wobbled in the breeze. Children shrieked in pursuit of a muddy football. Pensioners argued about knitting gauges with the tenacity reserved for warfare. Agatha marched right through the centre, projecting an air of imperious purpose that made several villagers flatten themselves out of her way. Back home, Hodge sat in her cottage window like a judgmental sentinel. He had refused to accompany her, apparently deciding she needed supervising from afar. His silhouette flickered behind the glass each time she looked back, which irritated her even more. Roy Silver arrived precisely when she didn't need him, dramatically, with a scarf bright enough to cause traffic accidents. "Darling," he cried, sweeping forward, "you look ghastly. Is it the auction? Is it your hair? Oh, do tell me it's your hair." "It's Bill," Agatha said tersely. Roy clasped his chest. "He's dead? Abducted? Secretly married?" "No," Agatha snapped. "Missing. And keep your voice down. People should really schedule their crises. I'm barely caffeinated." Agatha ignored him and marched to where Gladys Higgins manned a stall of knitted oddities. Gladys always knew everything. She had the air of a woman whose pleasant smile hid a thriving espionage career. "Gladys," Agatha began, "have you seen Bill Wong recently?" Gladys pursed her lips. "Not since Wednesday, dear. Looked rather hurried." "You noticed that too," Agatha said too eagerly. Gladys brightened at being right. "Oh, yes. And there was that man." Agatha leaned in. "What man?" "The one in the grey coat, by the bus stop, tallish, peculiar stance, like someone trying not to look suspicious, which of course made him suspicious." Gladys nodded, satisfied with her analysis. Roy perked up. "A mysterious stranger? This is marvellous." Gladys continued, enjoying the attention. Bill spoke to him, didn't look pleased, almost evasive. Then the man handed him a brown envelope. Sealed. Quite thick. Agatha's breath caught. "You're sure?" "As sure as I am that your WI treasurer is undercharging for those knitted hats," Gladys said, robbing herself blind. Agatha's thoughts spun. A stranger, a grey coat, a sealed envelope, Bill uncomfortable, Bill leaving without a word. It was a pattern she neither liked nor trusted. Before she could press for more, Roy clapped his hands. Speaking of envelopes, I heard Bill filed a complaint against a colleague at Mercester, some terribly sordid business. Agatha glared. Roy, stop inventing scandals. It's not inventing, darling, it's lying. Creative speculation. Stop it anyway, Roy pouted. You used to admire my imagination. I never admired your imagination. I tolerated it. Gladys eyed them both with the tolerant despair of someone accustomed to difficult relatives. Well, if Bill's mixed up with odd men in grey coats, I'd keep my wits about you. Agatha swallowed her retort. Wits were not the problem. Everyone else's lack of urgency was. She spent the next hour questioning villagers in brisk, relentless succession. Mrs. Hardy insisted Bill was probably interviewing suspects in Mercester. Mr. Jessup thought he was helping out at some charity thing. A gaggle of teenagers claimed they saw him cycling toward Evesham, though they also claimed to have seen a UFO over the allotments. Every answer irritated her more. Why is no one taking this seriously? She hissed to Roy as they crossed the green again. Because it's Bill, Roy said with a shrug. He's terribly responsible. If he vanished, he probably left a note somewhere sensible. He did not leave a note, Agatha fumed, and you're all useless. She stalked toward the village shop, determined to interrogate whoever stood nearest. But the bell chimed behind her, and Mrs. Bloxby emerged carrying a small paper bag. My dear Agatha, she said gently, you look rather tense. I am not tense, Agatha lied. I'm determined. Everyone else is useless. Mrs. Bloxby's soft smile was infuriatingly kind. Bill often takes time to himself. He works hard. He feels things deeply. That doesn't mean he vanishes. No, Mrs. Bloxby agreed, but it also doesn't mean he's in danger. Agatha hesitated. He looked troubled, you said. Yes, Mrs. Bloxby said, but not afraid. Thoughtful. Perhaps he was sorting something out privately. Well, he should have told me, Agatha muttered, angrier at her own hurt than at Bill's secrecy. Mrs. Bloxby rested a gentle hand on her arm. You have good instincts, Agatha. Trust them. Agatha pulled back, flustered by the warmth in the words. I need a drink, not wisdom. Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. Sometimes they're the same thing. Agatha marched away before she could feel anything sentimental. Trust her instincts? Her instincts were currently clawing at her ribs like agitated hens. By late afternoon, she had exhausted the villagers and herself. She stomped down the lane toward home, boots thudding with the force of her irritation. Bill was missing, clearly missing, and yet the village treated it like he'd nipped off to buy milk. She passed the vicarage, its garden neat and annoyingly serene. Mrs. Bloxby had already disappeared indoors, probably praying for Agatha's temper. Agatha kicked a pebble down the path. Trust my instincts, she muttered. My instincts say something is wrong and everyone else is hopeless. She turned the final corner toward her cottage and stopped abruptly. At the far end of the lane, half shrouded by the bend, stood a man in a grey coat. He wasn't moving. He wasn't walking. He was simply watching her. Agatha's breath hitched. Her hands curled into fists. She squinted, but distance blurred the details. Tall, still, coat buttoned, face in shadow. Roy's voice from earlier echoed in her ear. A mysterious stranger? Marvellous. This was not marvellous. Agatha took one decisive step forward. The man did not move. Another step. Still no movement. Then, abruptly, he turned and slipped behind the hedge, vanishing as neatly as if the lane had swallowed him. Agatha stood in the quiet lane, heartbeat thudding with equal parts alarm and fury. Someone was watching her, someone connected to Bill, someone who did not want to be seen. Well, she muttered, pulse quickening, that settles it. She strode to her gate with renewed determination. She would find Bill, and whoever that grey-coated man was, he would soon discover that annoying Agatha Raisin was a very unwise idea. Inside the cottage, Hodge leapt from the windowsill, stretching luxuriously as if he had done all the important work by staying put. Agatha stroked his warm fur, her thoughts sharp and unsettled. Bill was missing, a stranger was watching her, and Carsely was far too calm. Hodge purred, unimpressed by the drama. Agatha sighed. At least someone in this house isn't useless. The kettle clicked as it cooled, giving a small domestic sigh, one that made her shoulders drop just a fraction, but only a fraction. Agatha flung open her front door with the force of a woman preparing for battle. She fully expected to find Charles leaning against the gate with some infuriating quip, or perhaps the grey-coated stranger ready to be tackled. Instead, she found nothing. The lane was silent, touched with a soft twilight that made the hedges glow faintly. Peaceful. Entirely unhelpful. She stepped out and scanned the road, hands on hips. "Coward," she muttered to the empty air. "If you're going to lurk, at least have the decency to be confronted." Behind her, Hodge sat on the stairs with the regal patience of a magistrate waiting to hear her excuses. His tail wrapped neatly around his paws, and he blinked at her like someone who had watched her make many foolish decisions and anticipated several more. "Oh, don't start," Agatha told him, locking the door. "I need information and you're too lazy to fetch it." Hodge flicked an ear to show precisely what he thought of that remark. Agatha strode toward the vicarage, determined to consult the one person in Carsely who made sense even when Agatha didn't, Mrs. Bloxby. The vicarage glowed with gentle lamplight, promising kindness and tea, neither of which Agatha admitted she needed, but both of which she wanted. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door before Agatha knocked, as though expecting the disturbance. "My dear, come in. You look unsettled." "I am not unsettled," Agatha snapped, brushing past her. "I am investigating." "That's usually the same thing," Mrs. Bloxby said kindly. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes," Agatha said in the tone of someone granting permission for medical treatment. The vicarage living room radiated domestic warmth, a small fire humming in the grate, books stacked neatly, a faint smell of lavender, and something freshly baked. Agatha sat stiffly on the sofa, trying not to feel comforted. Mrs. Bloxby handed her a cup. "Now tell me what's troubling you." "Bill," Agatha said. "Obviously. He's missing. Everyone else is incompetent, and someone is watching me." Mrs. Bloxby didn't react with the alarm Agatha felt she deserved. Instead, her brows lifted slightly. "Someone watched you?" "A man in a grey coat, standing in the lane, looking at me in that sinister way men do when they're planning something." Mrs. Bloxby smiled gently. "Some men look sinister when they're planning what to have for supper." Agatha scowled. This one was planning something far worse. I don't know what, but Bill's mixed up in it. Mrs. Bloxby sipped her tea. "Bill came to see me earlier this week, you know." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "He did? Why didn't you say so immediately?" "You were rather fiery earlier," Mrs. Bloxby observed delicately. "I thought it best to wait until you had tea." Agatha huffed. "Fine, tell me." "He asked if I recognized a man he described only as someone who knows too much." He sounded uneasy, not frightened, just weighed down. Agatha leaned forward. "Knows too much about what?" "About a family dispute, I gathered. Bill asked if the parish records held anything about the Peckham estate." Agatha blinked. "The Peckhams?" "Yes. Harold Peckham died earlier this year. Lived in Evesham. Quite wealthy, from what I understand." "Bill never mentioned him to me." Mrs. Bloxby tilted her head. "Bill doesn't tell you everything, Agatha." "He should," Agatha said, too sharply. "I'm helpful." "You're formidable," Mrs. Bloxby agreed mildly. "Not everyone knows how to approach formidable people." Agatha ignored that. "What dispute?" "I believe it involved Harold's will. Bill was asking about parish references to the land boundaries and old transfers. Something about a beneficiary who contested the original terms." She paused. "And Harold's nephew seemed quite furious about something. Rupert, I believe." Agatha seized the name like a weapon. "Rupert Peckham?" "Yes. He visited the vicarage once. Difficult man. Very loud. He accused Bill of interfering quite unfairly." "A perfect suspect." Agatha stood. "I'm going to Evesham." "Perhaps take Charles," Mrs. Bloxby suggested gently. "No," Agatha said. "I need competence." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "Sometimes Charles surprises you." Agatha pretended not to hear. She finished her tea with military determination and left the vicarage before sentiment could creep in. Evesham seemed too calm for Agatha's rising irritation. She parked noisily in a narrow street of tidy townhouses and marched to Rupert Peckham's door. She rang the bell 3 times before he finally opened it, looking both irritated and pompous, a combination Agatha deeply distrusted. "Yes?" he demanded, as though she were selling encyclopedias. "I'm Agatha Raisin," she said briskly. "I'm looking for Bill Wong." Rupert snorted. That interfering policeman, what's he done now? Agatha bristled. He's missing. Missing? Nonsense, men like him don't go missing. Then where is he? Rupert folded his arms. No idea. But if you're implying I had anything to do with it, ridiculous. I didn't imply, Agatha said. I asked. Rupert rolled his eyes. Bill accused me of fraud, you know. Me. As if I'd bothered defrauding my own uncle. The man barely left us anything. So you had motive, Agatha said sweetly. Rupert flushed. I had annoyance, that's very different. Is it? Agatha pressed. Rupert's indignation deepened. Bill was poking around the estate accounts. He claimed irregularities. I told him he was seeing ghosts. If anything, Harold was just careless. Careless? Agatha repeated, filing it away. Absolutely, Rupert said. Lost receipts, vague records, odd payments. Nothing criminal, just chaos. Agatha's instincts prickled. Did Bill mention a man in a grey coat? Rupert frowned. Grey coat? No, though half of Evesham wears grey in winter. It's hardly sinister. It becomes sinister when they lurk in hedgerows, Agatha said. Rupert opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, deciding indignation was insufficient. Look, Mrs. Raisin, Bill came around earlier in the week asking questions. Dangerous questions. Agatha froze. Dangerous? Rupert waved a dismissive hand. About the Peckham money. Questions that got someone else in trouble before. Who? Rupert hesitated. I shouldn't say. You should, Agatha insisted, stepping closer, because Bill is missing, and every person who shrugs at that will regret it. Rupert swallowed. There was a previous disagreement. A financial advisor of Harold's, Linton, I think, got into terrible bother over misplaced funds. Some of us felt Bill was stirring old mud. Agatha's heart quickened. And did Linton resent that? Rupert hesitated again. Then, carelessly, irritably, he muttered, Resent it? The man nearly exploded. Told Bill to stop digging before he got someone into trouble again. Agatha's mind sparked. Again? Rupert seemed to realize he'd said too much. Look, I can't discuss private family matters. You just did, Agatha said briskly. Thank you. She left him sputtering. Outside, dusk had fallen into a clear night, lamplight steady along the street. Agatha stood under the glow, heart thrumming with the thrill of discovery and dread. Harold Peckham, a disputed estate, a disgruntled nephew, a furious adviser, a grey-coated man delivering brown envelopes, Bill asking dangerous questions about lost money. It was a pattern, a troubling one. She drove back to Carsely with a determination sharper than before. Bill hadn't just wandered off. He'd been onto something, and someone hadn't liked it. She parked by her cottage, breathing in the cool night air to steady herself. As she reached her door, Hodge appeared in the window, stretching luxuriously, as if unimpressed by how long she'd taken. Agatha unlocked the door, stepped inside, and stroked his warm fur. Well, she murmured, if Bill's mixed up in something dangerous, I suppose I am too. Hodge purred, entirely unimpressed. The kettle ticked quietly, its soft sigh filling the cottage like a reminder that even mysteries paused for tea, and Agatha, for the first time that day, allowed herself a small, steadying breath. Agatha Raisin pushed open the door of the Red Lion with the determination of a woman who intended to interrogate an entire pub if necessary. The warm bustle inside struck her immediately, low chatter, clinking glasses, the faint smell of chips and malt vinegar. Under any other circumstance she might have appreciated it. Today it felt like cheerful mockery. Roy Silver was already installed at the bar, leaning against it with theatrical ease, chatting to two locals who looked both dazzled and bewildered by him. His scarf, lurid, shimmering, deeply impractical, glowed under the pub lights like an exotic bird perched in the wrong habitat. Roy caught sight of Agatha and waved dramatically. "Darling, over here. You look frazzled. Sit, breathe. Pretend you're not terrifying the regulars." "I am not terrifying anyone," Agatha snapped, though several regulars had in fact taken a cautious half-step back. "Where's Charles?" "Floating in like a lazy saint any moment," Roy said, sipping something pink and alarming. Right on cue, Charles Fraith entered with his usual unbothered charm, flicking a speck of imaginary lint from his jacket. "Agatha," he drawled, "you sounded urgent, or irate. It's the same tone with you." Bill used to answer his phone, Agatha said without greeting. He no longer is. Therefore, something is wrong. Charles raised an eyebrow. Or he's avoiding the WI debacle. Charles, shut up. The landlord, Sam Purvis, balding, affable, and blessed with the patience of a monk, approached with 3 glasses. Drinks? You look like you need them. None for me, Agatha said. Information first. Sam hesitated. Right. Well, funny thing that. Agatha's heart jolted. Funny how? Sam bent slightly closer, lowering his voice the way villagers did when their words held dangerous potential. Found something. Belongs to Bill, I reckon. He reached under the bar and produced a small navy blue notebook. Agatha recognized the neat police-issued sort immediately. Her stomach tightened. Where did you find that? She demanded. Under his usual corner table, wedged between the leg and the wall. Thought he'd left it by accident, but, well, it looked placed. Agatha snatched it open with trembling impatience. Bill's handwriting marched neatly across the first few pages, tidy, careful notes. But midway through, the notebook changed. Entire pages had been removed, torn out cleanly at the spine. What the devil? She whispered. Roy leaned over her shoulder, eager. Is it a love confession? Did Bill run away with a mysterious widow? I've always suspected he had depths. Roy, shut up, Agatha growled. Roy continued, undeterred. The missing pages? Obviously romantic letters. Or perhaps secret poetry. Oh, the drama. Agatha slammed the notebook shut. There will be no romantic fantasies. This is evidence. Charles took the notebook from her before she snapped it in half. He examined the torn edges thoughtfully. These pages weren't ripped in a hurry. Someone used a blade. Neat, precise. They knew what they wanted. Agatha bristled with equal parts fear and triumph. So someone didn't want us seeing what Bill wrote. Or Bill didn't want anyone else seeing it, Charles countered mildly. Before Agatha could retort, Sam cleared his throat. There's more. On the back stub of one of the torn pages. Look there. Agatha flipped it open again, fingers tight. On the tiny remaining stub, Bill had written, clearly, Peckham, property transfer anomalies. A second scribble ran beneath it. Old deeds? Check boundaries? Agatha felt a rush of vindication. Peckham again. Rupert lied. Bill was investigating something. Charles peered closer. And look there, a doodle. Agatha frowned at the small, scribbled outline. A long coat, almost triangular. A person wearing it. And beneath it, a brief note in Bill's hand. Grey coat man. Agatha's pulse sharpened. That's the same man who watched me. The same man Gladys Higgins saw. Roy gasped dramatically. The plot thickens. Darling, we're practically in a BBC drama. Agatha resisted the urge to throw her glass at him. They took a table in the corner, notebook spread wide, each examining it with different flavours of intensity. Charles, cool and thoughtful. Roy, delighted and useless. Agatha, vibrating with concern she refused to name. Bill had written several short entries, fragmentary thoughts about the Peckham estate. Unsigned transfers? Question Doris Frobisher. Sightings? Check Evesham land registry hours. Someone lying. Agatha swallowed. He knew something dangerous. Charles nodded. Something worth removing pages over. Roy flapped a hand. Or something romantic and embarrassing. Agatha rounded on him. Stop with the romance. Roy folded his arms. Fine, but if Bill shows up with a breathtaking widow, I'll say I told you so. Agatha felt something sharp twist in her stomach. The thought of Bill having confided in some stranger, especially a woman, sent a thin spear of jealousy straight through her composure. Not that she would ever admit it. Charles closed the notebook. The missing pages are intentional. Someone reading these notes would have wanted whatever those pages contained. Agatha nodded grimly. Which means the missing pages hold the reason Bill vanished. Sam lingered by the table, wiping his hands on a bar towel. There's something else, he said quietly. Something I nearly forgot. Agatha braced herself. Yes? Bill was here Wednesday, late afternoon, looked distracted, almost nervous. Agatha leaned forward. What did he say? He asked me if anyone had overheard his conversation with that man in grey. Agatha's breath caught. He said that? Indeed. He seemed troubled. Told me to forget he'd mentioned it. Charles frowned. When did he leave? Right after getting a phone call, Sam said. Didn't finish his drink, just grabbed his coat and left quickly. Agatha's heart pounded. Who called him? Didn't say. Did you hear anything? Agatha pressed. Any tone, any reaction? Sam scratched his head. He looked startled, then determined, like he'd made up his mind about something. Agatha felt a wave of dread. And after he left? Sam shook his head. Didn't see him again. The weight of it pressed heavily on the table. Bill had come here. Bill had met someone. Bill had been troubled. And Bill had left after receiving a call, never to return. Charles set down the notebook. Well, we now know the timeline. Bill meets a man in grey, receives an envelope, writes notes, removes pages, or someone else does, comes here, gets a phone call, leaves, disappears. Roy sipped his drink with relish. Oh, darling, it's deliciously dramatic. This is not dramatic, Agatha snapped. This is serious. Roy raised an eyebrow. It's also dramatic. You can be both. Agatha ignored him, staring at the notebook. Bill's careful handwriting suddenly felt intimate, painfully so, as if she'd trespassed into his thoughts. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he gone to Mrs. Bloxby first? Why had he gone through all this alone? Because he thought I'd overreact, she thought bitterly. Charles watched her with a knowing expression. Agatha, jealousy is unbecoming. I'm not jealous, she barked, loud enough to make two pensioners look up. Charles smirked. Of course not, Agatha glowered. I simply don't like being excluded. Roy patted her hand. We know, darling. Agatha jerked her hand away. The notebook lay between them, its missing pages like a wound. Bill had been investigating something dangerous, something tied to the Peckham estate, land boundaries, money, lies, and someone in a grey coat had been part of it. Agatha closed the notebook gently, almost reverently. We're finding him, she said, before that grey-coated bastard does anything worse. Charles nodded, surprisingly earnest. I'm with you. Roy brightened. And I'm here for emotional support and style commentary. Agatha rolled her eyes. Useless. But she sounded almost fond. Sam cleared his throat again. One last thing, he said. Bill told me, quietly, if anyone asks, tell them I wasn't here long. Agatha stiffened. Why would he say that? Sam shrugged helplessly. He looked worried, like someone was watching him. Agatha exhaled shakily, fingers tightening around the notebook. The grey-coated man wasn't just watching Bill, he was watching her now too. Hodge's absence prickled painfully at her mind. She wished he were here, warm, reliable, unimpressed by the world. She pictured him curled on her armchair, waiting. Well, Agatha said, rising with fresh determination, we have work to do. Charles stood as well. Where to first? Everywhere Bill went, she said. Everything he touched, every person he annoyed. That's a long list, Roy noted. Agatha ignored him, tucking the notebook under her arm like a shield. Outside, as she stepped into the cool night, she imagined Hodge stretching luxuriously at home, tail flicking with haughty confidence. Don't worry, she murmured to an audience of none. I'm not letting Bill disappear on my watch. The pub door swung shut behind her with a soft thud, leaving the quiet lane ahead, darker, deeper, full of unwelcome possibilities. But Agatha walked forward anyway. She had Bill's notebook. She had a trail. And no one, least of all some man in a grey coat, was going to stop her. Agatha planted her hands on her hips. If you drive any slower, Charles, we'll arrive sometime next month. Charles, infuriatingly calm behind the wheel of his battered convertible, did not speed up. Patience, darling. Morton in Marsh won't run away. Bill might, Agatha snapped, though she instantly regretted the admission. She looked away, pretending to study the passing hedgerows. Frost clung to shaded corners, catching in white glints like sugared edges. The morning was cold but bright, almost cheerful, which made Agatha feel personally insulted. Charles glanced over. You worry too much. I worry the appropriate amount, Agatha said, and everyone else worries too little. That is the nature of everyone else, Charles agreed. They turned onto a narrow lane leading to the office of Harold Peckham's former solicitor. The building was a squat stone structure with peeling paint. Agatha sniffed at it in disapproval. Typical solicitor ambience, she muttered. Looks like it smells of old envelopes. Inside, they were greeted by Mr. Tranter, a man whose entire existence radiated irritation. His thinning grey hair stuck out as though offended by gravity. He peered at Agatha and Charles as if they were an unexpected audit. "Yes?" he demanded. Agatha stepped forward briskly. "We're here about Bill Wong, policeman, missing. You spoke with him earlier this week." Tranter's frown deepened. He asked for files. Peckham Estate. Very inconvenient. Agatha forced a polite tone. "Which files?" "Old boundary transfers, deed amendments, personal correspondences." He insisted on seeing original documents, not copies. I told him originals were fragile, but he wouldn't listen. Policemen rarely do. Charles gave Agatha a subtle look, almost impressed. Why was he so interested? Tranter waved a dismissive hand. The usual nonsense. Family quarrels. Peckham's will was revised several times. One beneficiary was removed quietly. "Who?" Agatha pressed. "Iris Selby," Tranter said, with a sniff that suggested he disapproved of her hairstyle, morals, and possibly her furniture. "Harold's former companion. Rather sentimental attachment. No legal standing." Agatha frowned. "Is that why she was removed?" "Allegedly. Though Harold sometimes changed documents impulsively. The man was erratic." Charles leaned back. "Bill thought Iris had a legitimate claim?" "Bill believed all sorts of romantic rubbish," Tranter said sharply. "He insisted Iris was being intimidated, forced to withdraw her claim. Absolute nonsense." Agatha bristled. "By whom?" Tranter shrugged. "Family members, advisors, neighbours, anyone. People fabricate intimidation whenever money is involved." A hint of disdain coloured his tone, and Agatha's instincts prickled. "Did Bill say he felt threatened?" "Threatened? No. Irritated? Absolutely." Agatha studied him narrowly. "Did Bill leave with any documents?" "No, I wouldn't allow it. He only took notes. Excessive ones." Agatha stiffened. Notes. The notebook with missing pages. Someone had not wanted those notes to remain intact. Tranter continued, unprompted. "Iris Selby is not the innocent flower she pretends. Manipulative woman. Wouldn't be shocked if she engineered Wong's disappearance." Agatha's jaw clenched. Red herring, her instinct said immediately. Too convenient. Too pointed. Charles spoke before she could. "Bit harsh, isn't it? Iris is elderly." "Elderly women are the worst," Tranter snapped. "They have nothing to do but plot." Agatha stood abruptly. "Where does Iris live?" "Cottage on the north edge of Morton. Ugly place. And she talks too much." Agatha offered him a tight smile. "Excellent. Thank you for your help." "I wasn't helping," Tranter muttered. Charles parked outside a small, tidy cottage with ivy hugging its walls. Agatha took it in. "Not ugly," she said. "Tranter's a pompous windbag." "Some windbags inflate themselves for warmth," Charles offered. Agatha ignored him and knocked. The door opened slowly. Iris Selby stood there, frail, soft-spoken, wrapped in a cardigan that had seen multiple decades. Her eyes widened. "Oh, you're not Bill." Agatha's heart pinched. "No, I'm Agatha Raisin. This is Charles Fraith. We're trying to find him." Iris leaned on the doorframe, sadness fluttering across her features. Bill was kind. He listened. Most people don't. Agatha softened despite herself. "Did he visit you this week?" "Yes. He helped me write a statement. He said it might protect me if things became difficult." She ushered them inside, where the cottage smelled of tea and worn books. "He believed someone wanted the Peckham matter buried." "Someone inside the police force?" Agatha asked. Iris hesitated, then nodded. "He didn't trust everyone in his department. He didn't say who, but he looked worried." Agatha felt the sharp throb of fear return. "Did he say he'd come back?" "He promised he would," Iris whispered. "But he never did." Charles sat near the window, instantly charming. "You have a lovely garden. Do you tend it alone?" Iris blushed faintly. "Sometimes my neighbour helps." And indeed, at that moment the neighbour, a tall, handsome man with sleeves rolled up, appeared at the fence. He waved at Iris. Charles brightened mischievously and waved back, earning Agatha's sharp elbow in his ribs. "We're working," she hissed. "That doesn't mean we can't multitask," Charles murmured. Agatha would have throttled him if Iris hadn't returned carrying a sheet of paper. "This is the statement Bill helped me write." She handed it over with trembling fingers. Agatha unfolded it carefully, and there in the margin, written in Bill's precise hand, were the words, "If anything happens, look for the man who wasn't invited." Agatha's breath left her in a hard, cold rush, because now she knew this was no ordinary disappearance. This was Bill's warning. Agatha stared at the margin note as if it might rearrange itself into something less alarming. It didn't. Bill had written it deliberately, in that steady, careful hand he used when something mattered. Look for the man who wasn't invited. Not the man in grey. Not a colleague. Someone else. Someone whose presence at a key moment had been unexpected. Charles leaned closer. Clever fellow, Bill. Annoyingly so. Iris folded her hands. He told me someone attended Harold's memorial who shouldn't have been there. Someone no one recognized. Agatha whipped around. Who? I'm not certain, Iris said weakly. Bill didn't give a name, only that the man lingered near Harold's papers during the gathering. Bill meant to investigate. Agatha began to pace, and then Bill vanished, and someone carved pages out of his notebook, and a grey-coated lurker appears in Carsely, and Tranter lies by omission. Charles watched her with an expression that hovered between admiration and amusement. You do have a talent for menace. This is serious, Agatha snapped. Someone is trying to silence Bill. Iris's eyes filled with worry. Do you think he's hurt? No, Agatha said firmly. Bill is too sensible to get himself killed. Terribly inconvenient, yes, but not killable. Charles laughed softly. Comforting analysis. Agatha ignored him, scanning the cottage for anything else Bill might have left behind. A mug, a notepad, a forgotten file. Something. But Iris shook her head. He didn't bring anything with him when he returned the last time, only asked if he could borrow my pen. Agatha stiffened. Pens could matter. Pens could hide things. She seized Iris's pen from the small dish by the door. Is this it? Yes, Iris said. A cheap one. Nothing special. Agatha uncapped it, half expecting a hidden message. Nothing. She sighed and put it down reluctantly. Fine. Maybe he used it to write something before he left. Charles leaned toward Iris in a way that made Agatha twitch. When you saw him last, did anything else seem unusual? Iris thought for a moment. He looked over his shoulder several times as though expecting someone to appear. He said he didn't trust the new interest in the Peckham estate. Agatha blinked. New interest? Yes. Someone, he didn't say who, had been asking about Harold's finances. Someone who claimed to be a distant cousin, but Bill couldn't verify the name. Agatha felt her scalp prickle. A cousin Harold never mentioned. Exactly, Iris whispered. Agatha exchanged a look with Charles, the man who wasn't invited. Charles stretched his legs. Seems likely. At that moment, Iris's neighbour approached the doorway with a tray of biscuits. He smiled warmly. Thought you might want something sweet. Investigations need sugar, don't they? Charles practically lit up. Agatha's eyes narrowed. We're working, she told the neighbour before Charles could charm him into offering his phone number. The neighbour blinked. Right. Well, Iris, shout if you need help. He left and Charles sighed wistfully. I'd forgotten how pleasant Morton can be. Agatha turned on him. Focus. I am focused, Charles said, just not exclusively. Agatha glared at him until he adopted a suitably chastened expression. She folded the statement again, protecting the note with her palm. Iris, has anyone else asked you about Harold's will recently? Yes, she said slowly. A man called Linton. Tall, grey coat. He came asking if Harold ever discussed debts. He was quite insistent. Agatha felt ice sluice down her spine. Grey coat, Iris nodded. Bill didn't trust him. He said Linton had been involved in Harold's financial chaos years ago. Red herring or genuine threat? Agatha couldn't tell yet. She thanked Iris, promised to stay in touch, and marched outside with Charles trailing behind. Right, Agatha declared, planting her feet firmly. We're going to find Linton. And we're going to find out why Harold Peckham's estate has produced more trouble than a WI jam judging scandal. Charles tilted his head. Mercester first? Yes, and if anyone tries to stop me, I'll run them over. With my car? Charles asked dryly. With whatever is closest, Agatha said. Charles chuckled. Very well, but before we go, I must say, your jealousy about Bill is rather adorable. Agatha nearly tripped. I am not jealous. Of course not. You're merely furious that Bill confided in Mrs. Bloxby, Iris Selby, and possibly half of Evesham before speaking to you. Agatha's cheeks heated. He should have told me. Why? So you could shout at him? Yes, Agatha snapped. At least he'd know I cared. Charles sobered a fraction, watching her climb into the car. He knows. The sincerity unsettled her. She looked away quickly. Well, he'd better still be alive to appreciate it. They drove back toward the main road, the cold afternoon sunlight flashing against the windscreen. Agatha held the folded statement tightly, Bill's margin note burning in her mind. Look for the man who wasn't invited. Whoever that man was, he had interfered at the memorial. He had lingered near Harold's papers. He had resurfaced in Iris's life. And he had now crossed paths with Bill and with Agatha. They reached Carsely near dusk. The village lay in gentle stillness, lamps beginning to glow behind cottage windows. Agatha felt the fatigue of the day settling into her bones, but determination pushed against it like a fresh spark. Inside her cottage, Hodge stretched luxuriantly on the armchair, unimpressed by her dramatic return. He blinked once, as if awarding her a single point for effort. Agatha stroked his warm fur, letting the familiar comfort steady her. "Well, Hodge," she murmured, "there's a man out there causing trouble, and we're going to find him." Hodge yawned, utterly unconcerned with mortal affairs. The kettle clicked behind her, releasing a soft sigh. Agatha inhaled deeply. Tomorrow, she would hunt the man who wasn't invited. Tonight, she would drink tea with her cat. "Stop waving it about like a film prop," Agatha snapped as Roy held Bill's margin note to the light, as though expecting it to reveal hidden ink. Roy tutted. "Darling, if you handed this to any London producer, they'd commission a 6-episode thriller by lunchtime." "Bill wasn't writing thrillers," Agatha said sharply. "He was leaving clues. Practical, sensible clues." Charles lounged against her kitchen counter, hands in pockets, looking entirely too content. "Practical is overstating things. The man wrote one vague warning and trusted you to leap to heroic conclusions." Agatha glared at him. "He trusted me because I have instincts." "You have impatience," Charles corrected, "and very loud instincts." Hodge, sprawled on the dresser like a furry judge, flicked an ear in agreement. Agatha thrust the note back into her handbag. "We are going to Morton again. Rupert Peckham owes us answers." Roy brightened far too much. "Excellent. I enjoy interrogating pompous men." "He's not pompous," Agatha muttered. "He's arrogant. Entirely different." Late afternoon cast long shadows as they reached the Peckham house again. Agatha told Roy and Charles to stay quiet, which guaranteed they would not. Rupert Peckham answered the door with the expression of a man continually disappointed by visitors. "You again?" he said to Agatha. "I already told you everything I know." Agatha pushed past him without ceremony. "And you lied, or you omitted. Same thing." Rupert huffed. "I do not lie. It's vulgar." Roy slid in behind her. "So is your wallpaper, darling, but we move forward." Rupert turned beetroot red. "Who is this flamboyant person?" "A concerned citizen," Roy said, striking a small pose. "Now, about the memorial," Agatha cut in. "We need the guest list." Rupert flapped a hand. "Family? Close friends? No one unusual?" Agatha stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Bill Wong is missing. You will reconsider your definition of unusual." Rupert blinked, startled, then rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Oh, well, there was someone," Roy gasped theatrically. "A twist." Agatha ignored him. "Who?" Rupert gestured helplessly. "A man, tall grey coat, claimed to be Harold's distant cousin, Graham Linton. Said Harold wanted him notified." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "And that didn't strike you as odd?" "It is vulgar to eject mourners," Rupert repeated stiffly. He looked harmless. "Men in grey coats rarely are," Agatha snapped. "Was he on any formal list?" "No," Rupert admitted. "But Harold's family tree is absurdly tangled. One hesitates to challenge unexpected branches." Roy clapped a hand to his chest. "So poetic." Agatha pressed harder. "Did this Linton speak to anyone?" He hovered near the table where Harold's papers were displayed. The guest book, the condolence cards. He didn't mingle, just lingered. Charles's voice sharpened. "And Bill noticed?" Rupert nodded reluctantly. "Bill asked me later who the man was, but when I told him the name he went strangely quiet. Then he left." Agatha's pulse quickened. "Did Bill say he suspected him?" No, Bill was not reckless with accusations. Rupert hesitated. But he looked uncomfortable. Agatha's instincts flared. And you let that man leave? Without checking his connection? Rupert stiffened. I'm not a detective. Yes, Agatha said dryly. It shows. Roy inspected the mantelpiece, clearly bored. Darling, shall we depart? This house depresses me. Agatha turned back to Rupert. One last thing, did you see Linton again? Rupert swallowed. No, but someone mentioned he had been making inquiries about Iris Selby. Agatha bristled. Iris? Why? Rupert shrugged. He implied she had been promised something, that Harold regretted excluding her. I assumed he was some advocate acting on her behalf. Red herring, Agatha thought. Too convenient. Iris was too frail for conspiracies. Charles stepped toward the door. We understand. Thank you. Agatha barely muttered a goodbye before striding outside. The fading light cast a blue sheen over the drive. Roy sauntered after her. Well, Linton appears again. Quite the recurring villain. Agatha marched toward the car, jaw set. We're not done. We check family records. Linton's name must appear somewhere. Charles slid into the driver's seat. And if it doesn't? Agatha buckled herself in. Then Bill was right. He's not family. He's not a friend. He's not a distant cousin. Roy leaned forward between them. He's the man who wasn't invited. Agatha nodded grimly. Exactly. Back in Carsely, dusk washed the cottages in gold. Agatha felt her earlier determination wobble with a softer unease. Charles parked outside her cottage and turned to her with unusual seriousness. You're frightened for him, he said gently. Agatha stiffened. Don't be ridiculous. It isn't ridiculous, Charles said. It's obvious. Agatha looked away, watching the gentle lamplight glow through her sitting-room curtains. He should have told me, she muttered. Perhaps he meant to, Charles said. Perhaps he still will. Agatha exhaled sharply, irritation masking fear. You're insufferable when you're kind, Charles smiled, and yet you keep me around. Before she could retort, her phone rang. Doris Simpson's voice crackled anxiously down the line. Mrs. Raisin, there's a man outside your cottage, grey coat. Been standing there nearly 10 minutes. Agatha froze. Is he still there? Yes, Doris whispered, and he's looking straight at your window. Agatha's heartbeat spiked. The man who wasn't invited had come to Carsely. Agatha snapped her mobile shut so abruptly that Charles flinched. He's here, she said. Grey coat, outside my cottage. Roy squeaked. Darling, we can't go in there. He might be armed or deranged or both. Agatha marched toward her gate with furious purpose. If he's deranged enough to bother me, he can deal with the consequences. Charles caught her arm. Agatha, think. I've done enough thinking, she snapped. Now I act. Roy muttered, and thus Britain trembles. But Agatha did pause, just long enough to grab the nearest object, a flower pot. A heavy one. Charles sighed. You cannot bludgeon every suspicious man in the Cotswolds. Watch me, Agatha said. They approached the end of the lane. Agatha could feel her pulse in her fingertips, sharp and insistent. The street lamps cast dim pools of light, not enough to see clearly, but enough to make her imagination unhelpfully vivid. Then she saw him, tall, grey coat, standing too still, facing her cottage window as if waiting for something to appear inside it. Agatha tightened her grip on the flower pot. Charles murmured, Perhaps we approach calmly. No, Agatha hissed, we surprise. She stepped out of the shadow. You, stop right there. The man turned. Agatha had expected menace, perhaps guilt. Instead, his expression was one of mild surprise. Mrs. Raisin? Agatha blinked. You know who I am? Yes, he said. Bill Wong told me you might be looking for him. Charles stepped forward sharply. Where is he? The man raised both hands in a placating gesture. Not here. Not safe. Agatha's fingers twitched on the flower pot. Explain now. My name is Graham Linton, he said simply. Roy gasped. The villain, the lurker, the uninvited mourner. Linton winced. I didn't lurk, I waited. Agatha advanced until she stood 3 feet from him, flower pot poised. Start talking. Linton swallowed. Harold Peckham owed money, a great deal of it, to people you don't want to meet. I was hired to check whether Harold's estate had assets hidden away. I attended the memorial to identify family connections. Agatha narrowed her eyes. But you told Rupert you were a cousin. I lied, Linton said plainly. If I'd announced myself as a financial investigator, I'd have been thrown out. And Bill realized that. Charles folded his arms. Why did you speak to Bill? Because he asked questions no one else dared, Linton replied. He knew Harold's finances were tangled. He knew someone was trying to bury the truth. Agatha stepped closer. Where is Bill now? Alive? Yes, Linton said firmly. Alive, but he's hiding for his own safety. Agatha's breath hitched. Relief warred with fury. Why didn't he come to me? Linton hesitated, choosing his words. Because he didn't want you involved. Agatha nearly threw the flower pot just for emphasis. How dare he? Linton looked pained. He said you'd run headfirst into danger. Roy muttered. Accurate. Charles murmured. Fair. Agatha glared at both of them. I am perfectly capable of caution. Charles raised an eyebrow. With a flower pot. Shut up, Agatha snapped. Linton lowered his hands. Bill discovered someone within the police force had been paid to misfile documents tied to Peckham's land. Bill confronted them. That's when he realized he was being watched. By you, Agatha demanded. No, Linton said, offended. By the person who hired me. Agatha blinked. You have an employer? Had, Linton corrected. I quit when I understood what they wanted. They don't want debt settled. They want assets stolen. Peckham's land is worth millions. Agatha stared at him, heart pounding. Who hired you? Linton shook his head. Can't say. If I name them, Bill will no longer be safe. Agatha was trembling now, not with fear, but with frustration. You came here to tell me something. What? Linton reached into his pocket slowly, carefully so Charles didn't tackle him, and pulled out a folded slip of paper. He handed it to Agatha. He said you'd know what to do. Agatha unfolded it. Bill's handwriting stared back at her. Don't trust the records office. Don't trust the officer in charge. Follow the deeds, not the signatures. Agatha felt the world narrow to that one moment. Bill wasn't just missing. Bill was in the middle of something enormous, and he believed she could solve it. Linton stepped back. I shouldn't stay. If they see me here, you'll be in danger. Agatha's chin lifted defiantly. Let them try. Linton managed a thin smile. Now I see why Bill trusts you. And before she could respond, he slipped down the lane and vanished into the evening shadows. Roy exhaled dramatically. Well, that was very MI5. Charles rubbed his forehead. Agatha, this is bigger than we thought. Agatha folded the note carefully, protectively. Good. I like big. She strode toward her cottage, feeling the spark of determination ignite into something fiercer. Inside, Hodge greeted her with an unimpressed blink. Agatha set Bill's note beside him. We're getting him back, Hodge. Hodge yawned, stretched, and flicked his tail. The kettle clicked on, filling the cottage with its gentle hum. Agatha inhaled. Tomorrow she would tear through Mercester's records office like a winter storm. Tonight she had tea with her cat. Hodge, what have you done now? Agatha cried the moment she stepped inside her cottage. It wasn't a real accusation, more the automatic exasperation of a woman whose cat frequently behaved like an alarm system with opinions. Hodge sat on the windowsill, tail flicking in crisp, decisive strokes. His posture was stiff, alert, and rather smug, as if he had single-pawedly defended the British Isles from invasion. Charles, stepping in behind her, frowned. Why is he staring like that? Did you bring home another admirer? Agatha ignored him. Something felt wrong, not dangerous, not dramatic, but wrong in the quiet, unmistakable way that made her instincts bristle. The kitchen held a faint, lingering smell she recognized instantly. Cigar smoke. Not cigarette smoke. She'd have recognized her own brand anywhere. This was heavier, richer, the kind smoked by men who said "old boy" unironically. Agatha froze, then panicked, then froze again, because panic was unflattering. Someone's been here, she whispered. Roy, who had drifted in after them, clapped a hand to his mouth. A dramatic intrusion. Quick, check for footprints, secret codes, abandoned cufflinks. Shut up, Roy, Agatha snapped, though with less heat than usual. Her nerves were stretched taut, trembling between terror and vindication. Hodge leapt from the sill to the kitchen table with a decisive thump. Agatha followed, and stopped dead. There, held down by Hodge's paw, As though the cat were personally safeguarding national secrets, lay a scrap of torn paper. Her breath caught. Bill's handwriting. Small, neat, intensely familiar. She snatched it up. Still alive. Don't call police yet. Trust Agatha. For a moment, everything inside her expanded. Relief, fear, fury, pride, and something far more treacherous that she refused to name. Bill was alive. Alive, leaving her messages like some covert partner in a crime novel. Alive, trusting her when everyone else doubted. Roy leaned over her shoulder. Oh, darling, he's staging his triumphant detective's return. How theatrical. How perfectly. Agatha elbowed him. Bill is not theatrical. He is sensible, careful, reasonable. Roy snorted. Reasonable men don't leave secret notes in women's kitchens. Perhaps he thought I needed subtlety, Agatha said defensively. Charles, inspecting the room, added, or perhaps he didn't want the wrong person to see it. That cigar smell. Yes, Agatha breathed. Someone was here. Roy shivered delightedly. A villain, inside your very home. How spine-tingling. Agatha rounded on him. This is not entertainment. Well, it's not boring, Roy muttered, retreating behind Charles. Hodge jumped onto the counter, tail flicking insistently. At first, Agatha assumed he was angling for food. Hodge was always angling for food, but then she saw where he was looking. The radiator. Charles followed the line of Hodge's glare. What's your cat plotting? Chaos, Agatha said. Always chaos. Hodge stretched out one paw and began batting determinedly at something beneath the radiator, something Charles apparently recognized. My gloves, he exclaimed. Hodge, you foul little tyrant. Those were expensive. Hodge's expression didn't change. He simply intensified his pawing, clearly pleased by Charles's distress. Agatha, distracted from fear for a moment, allowed herself a smirk. He knows quality when he ruins it. Charles knelt, muttering dire threats, and reached under the radiator. Honestly, Agatha, you encourage this misbehavior. Cats must be ruled, not negotiated with. His sentence cut off abruptly. Agatha, he said, there's something else under here. He pulled out a second scrap of paper, crumpled, dirt-smudged, but unmistakably matching the first. Hodge, looking very pleased with himself, thumped his tail. Agatha seized it. Bill's handwriting again. He wants something I found. I hid it. Agatha felt her heart jolt. First note, alive. Second note, hunted. Her pulse quickened. He must have hidden something in my cottage. Or Carsely. Somewhere close. Roy clasped his hands. A treasure hunt. How marvellous! Agatha glared at him so fiercely he shrank 2 inches. Bill is not leaving me clues for amusement. Charles rose to his feet, brushing dust from his knees. He left them because he trusts your ability to find him. Agatha's chest tightened. Uncomfortable, hot, unwelcome. He should never have been in danger in the first place. Charles said softly, he didn't choose danger. He chose truth. Agatha turned away quickly, blinking at the kettle as though it had personally betrayed her. He was in this kitchen, recently, close enough for Hodge to notice. Roy gasped. Hodge saw the intruder. He's a witness. Hodge yawned. Well, Roy said, deflated, a mostly indifferent witness. Agatha moved through her kitchen slowly, fingertips brushing surfaces, taking in tiny details. A chair slightly off angle, a cupboard handle not fully turned, a faint indentation near the table leg. Not enough for police evidence, enough for intuition. Bill had been here, and someone else had too. Someone who smoked expensive cigars, someone who wanted what Bill had hidden. A cold determination settled over her. I'm finding it, she murmured. Whatever Bill hid, I'm finding it first. Behind her, Hodge flicked his tail in solemn agreement. Agatha paced her kitchen like a general preparing for a small but determined war. The notes lay on the table, weighted down by the salt shaker to stop her hands trembling. Bill had been here. Bill had trusted her. Bill had also been chased by a cigar-smoking villain with poor boundary habits. Charles leaned against the fridge, watching her with an expression that hovered between amusement and worry. Agatha, sit down. I will not sit down, she snapped. People who sit down miss things. Roy, perched delicately on a chair, raised a finger. You're missing things while standing, darling. Perhaps try diagonally. Agatha ignored them both and swept into the sitting room. Hodge followed like a furry detective, tail aloft in supervisory mode. The faint smell of cigar smoke lingered here too, subtle now, drifting through the air like a smug reminder. Agatha inhaled sharply. He walked through my house. My house. I ought to charge him rent. Charles trailed her. Or call the police. No, Agatha said quickly, clutching Bill's note. He said not to call them yet. Charles frowned. He might be wrong. Bill is rarely wrong, Agatha insisted. Annoying, yes. Wrong, no. Roy nodded vigorously. Also handsome, in a humble, good-natured sort of way. Honestly, if I weren't— Roy, Agatha snapped. This is not the time to compose fan mail. They followed Hodge into the hall where he stopped, sniffed and swatted at the skirting board. Agatha knelt. What is it? Another clue? A secret passage? A villain hiding under the floorboards? Hodge sat and licked his paw, having apparently completed his contribution. Charles tapped the wall. Bill said he hid something. If he was being followed, he'd choose a spot ordinary enough to be overlooked. Agatha scanned the hallway. Coat rack, mirror, shoes, a stack of unopened posts she kept meaning to sort. And the umbrella stand. Agatha lunged for it. Of course! Roy jumped back. Darling, warn people before you charge objects. She ignored him and tipped the stand onto its side. Umbrellas rolled out. One clattered suspiciously. Agatha seized it. This isn't mine. It was plain, sturdy, and unremarkable. Too unremarkable for Agatha, who preferred umbrellas that suggested glamour and possible self-defense. Charles inspected it. Looks ordinary enough. Exactly, Agatha said. Bill would hide something ordinary inside something ordinary. She shook it gently. Something rattled. Roy gasped. A secret compartment! Agatha unscrewed the handle. Inside, tightly rolled, was a sheet of paper. Her heart leapt. She unrolled it carefully and felt her stomach drop. A land deed. Old, yellowed, brittle, but unmistakably official. Charles leaned close. Harold Peckham's handwriting. This is original. Roy peered over their shoulders. But what does it mean? Agatha pointed to the margins where Bill had scribbled urgently. Forgery confirmed. Boundaries altered. Someone stole land. Follow money. Charles let out a low whistle. Peckham's estate was tampered with. And someone made a fortune, Agatha said. A fortune built on fraud. Bill uncovered it. Roy swallowed. Which means the villain wants this deed back. Agatha rolled it tightly and tucked it under her arm. Then they're not getting it. Hodge rubbed against her leg as if claiming equal credit for the discovery. She bent to stroke him. Good work, soldier. Roy dabbed his eyes. A heroic cat. This will look marvellous in the audiobook cover art. Roy, Agatha said, if you try to put Hodge in a cape, I will bury you in the allotments. Roy sniffed. I was thinking of a tasteful cloak. Charles cleared his throat. Agatha, what now? Agatha straightened. Now we follow Bill's trail. The deeds, the signatures. Whoever altered these documents, whoever paid to bury this, knows Bill is alive, and knows he trusted me. Charles nodded slowly, meaning they'll come for you next. Agatha's chin lifted defiantly. Let them try, Roy squeaked. Let them what? Agatha strode into the kitchen and placed the deed on top of Bill's notes. We leave for Mercester first thing tomorrow. Records office. And if anyone gets in my way— Charles sighed. You'll run them over? I'll outwit them, Agatha corrected primly. Running them over is plan B. Roy fanned himself dramatically. I must say, danger suits you. Agatha rolled her eyes, though secretly his theatrics steadied her nerves. Hodge jumped onto the table again, settling beside Bill's scraps. His calm presence grounded her more than she liked to admit. Charles touched her arm lightly. We'll find him. Agatha swallowed hard. We'd better. The kettle clicked behind them, releasing its soft, homely sigh. Agatha looked at Bill's handwriting one last time before turning out the kitchen light. Tomorrow, she would follow the trail. Tonight, she had Hodge and tea. Agatha's patience wore thin the moment Charles announced with dreadful cheer, searching a missing policeman's cottage sounds frightfully diverting. Roy, who had applied enough cologne to fumigate a stable, added, and dusty. I'm warning you now, Aggie, I do not do cobwebs. Then you shouldn't have come, Agatha snapped, pushing open Bill's cottage door with more force than necessary. In truth, she was grateful for their company, but she would rather have been boiled in jam than admit it. The little cottage felt hollow, a place paused mid-thought, curtains half-drawn, a mug abandoned in the sink, the faintest smell of Bill's terrible instant coffee clinging to the air. Agatha bristled at the stillness, as though the house itself were waiting for her to get on with it. "All right," she said. "We search everything, properly. No swanning about pretending to help." Charles adopted a wounded expression. "I never swan, I glide." Roy coughed exaggeratedly. "I, for one, glide with purpose." "Both of you hush," Agatha ordered, "and start looking." Roy tiptoed into the sitting room with the caution of a man entering a lion enclosure. "I'm already sneezing," he announced, though he wasn't. "Dust is a personal attack on me." Charles wandered toward the bookcase. Bill always did have terrible taste in novels, he mused, running a hand along the spines. "I don't trust a man who owns this many doorstop thrillers." Agatha ignored them, bending beside Bill's small writing desk. She opened drawers with brisk, sharp movements. Inside, paperclips, receipts, an aging biro, and a half-finished crossword filled neatly in Bill's tight handwriting. Something about that tidy grid made her throat tighten. Bill always completed crosswords early, a sign of his orderly mind. An unfinished one was wrong enough to terrify her a little. "Nothing here," she muttered, hating the tremor in her voice. Charles glanced over. "He's all right, Aggie. He leaves things half-done sometimes. Remember that abysmal curry he started making once?" "That was you," she snapped. He conceded with a lazy smile. "Yes, well, point remains," Roy shrieked from the hallway. "Spider! Beast! Creature of evil!" Agatha marched over. "Where?" "It ran behind the shoe rack," Roy whispered, pale. "That's not a clue, Roy." "It could be," he protested. "Maybe Bill befriended it. Maybe it witnessed something." "Move," she said, shoving past him. She pulled out the shoe rack, nothing but a limp duster and a long faded scuff on the skirting board. She was about to push it back when she noticed the slightest lift in the wood. A hairline misalignment, barely visible. Her pulse tapped faster. "Charles," she called, "help me lift this." Charles crouched beside her. "If some ghastly rodent leaps out—" "It won't," Agatha said, though she wasn't certain. She wedged her nails beneath the board. It shifted. Slowly, but enough. "Aha," Roy hovered behind them. "Is this the part where something cursed pops out?" "No," Agatha said. "It's the part where you shut up." Charles tugged the board free. Behind it was a small recess, and inside sat a dust-coated cassette tape. A proper, old-fashioned compact cassette, the kind one used before technology stole all satisfaction from life. On its label, Bill's neat handwriting read, "Peckham Confession." Agatha stared. "Oh, Bill, what have you done?" Roy squealed. "A confession! This is so spooky. Thrilling! Could be a murder confession, a love confession. Maybe Harold Peckham had some scandal, like an affair with a duchess." "Roy," Agatha said, "if you keep talking, I will record a confession myself and label it Roy's last words." Roy blinked. "Not loving the tone, Aggie." But Agatha barely heard him. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the cassette. Beneath it lay another treasure, a torn sheet in Bill's unmistakable writing. She unfolded it carefully. Linton pressured Iris. Threatened civil action. Wants her claim off the record. Hostile. Possible fraud. Charles read over her shoulder. So Linton was truly involved. "Yes," Agatha muttered. And Bill knew it. Roy swayed dramatically. What if Bill's been kidnapped or bribed or seduced by a glamorous heiress? "Roy." All right, but you can't blame me for imagining the dramatic scenario." Agatha closed her eyes briefly. She could blame him for every scenario, but she stuffed the irritation aside. "We need something to play this tape on." Charles rose. "I spotted a portable cassette player in the bedroom. Vintage. Might still work." "Fetch it," Agatha said. Moments later, Charles returned with a dusty silver player. He inserted the tape. The machine whirred, hissed, then crackled. A man's voice emerged. Thin, frail, elderly. "This is Harold Peckham. If someone is listening to this, then something has gone badly." Agatha felt the tiny hairs on her arms lift. Harold continued, voice wavering but clear. "I want to set matters right. Iris Selby, good woman, loyal. I changed my will because she deserves security. Linton, my advisor, said otherwise. Manipulated me. Years of it, lies dressed as advice. But I have put the truth in writing now. If anything happens, Iris must know. A sharp clatter, a gasp, a scrape, the recording cut off. Roy made a tiny squeak. Oh, that's eerie, very melodramatic. I bet he staged that crash for atmosphere. Agatha glared at him. Harold Peckham wasn't the type to stage anything, except maybe a vegetable competition. Charles rewound a few seconds. Linton's manipulation? Interesting. And Bill must have realized this tape exposed everything. Agatha pressed her palms against the table. He hid it here because he feared someone inside the police force wanted this whole thing forgotten. Iris warned us Bill felt someone was watching him. Roy perked up. Meaning he's alive. Probably undercover. Possibly eating terrible food and longing for my company. Or, Agatha said tightly, he's hiding because Linton threatened him. Charles nodded. And Linton needed to retrieve this tape before Bill turned it in. Agatha exhaled sharply. Right. We take everything to Bill's sergeant. Immediately. Roy pointed wildly at the tape. But what if it melts in police custody? What if something corrupt happens? What if... Roy, Agatha said, if you keep spiraling, I'll stick you under the floorboards next. He gasped. Aggie, that was uncalled for. But before she could retort, a sudden knock rattled the cottage door. Agatha froze. Charles straightened. Roy squeaked and ducked behind the chair. The knock came again, firm, purposeful. Agatha moved toward the door, heart hammering. She pulled it open. A tall man filled the doorway. Grey coat, expression mild, almost polite, eyes cold as slate. Good afternoon, he said calmly. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Roy whimpered. Agatha's jaw tightened. Mr. Linton, I assume? He smiled faintly. Yes, and you, Mrs. Raisin, have something I very much need returned. Charles stepped beside her, casual but ready. Bit forward, aren't you, barging into a policeman's cottage? I'm acting in everyone's best interests, Linton replied smoothly. Bill Wong misplaced sensitive material. I've come to collect it. Agatha held her ground. Funny, Bill didn't mention you as a close colleague. Linton's gaze flicked to the cassette player. That recording is property of the Peckham estate. It contains private reflections, nothing more. That's not what it sounded like, Roy muttered from behind the chair. Linton ignored him. I don't want a confrontation. Hand it over, and this unpleasantness ends. Agatha studied him. The man was too calm, too assured. His coat immaculate, hair neatly combed, expression entirely unmoved by the thought of Bill's disappearance. She saw no concern, only calculation. Where's Bill? She demanded. Linton tilted his head. Safe, I imagine. Bill is resourceful, but he shouldn't have involved himself in matters beyond his remit. Her skin prickled. Meaning the Peckham estate? Meaning everything, he said simply. Now, the tape. Charles leaned closer to Agatha and whispered, Buy time. She folded her arms. I'll hand over nothing until Bill contacts me directly. Linton gave a long, measured sigh. I had hoped to resolve this pleasantly. Roy squealed again. This is it. He's going to knock us off. No one is knocking anyone off, Charles muttered, though tension threaded his voice. Linton stepped inside, blocking the doorway completely. Agatha felt the cottage shrink. You misunderstand, he said, voice cool. I am trying to prevent a very old man's confused rambling from causing unnecessary harm. Agatha held his gaze. Harold Peckham wasn't confused at all. You manipulated him, and he recorded proof. A flicker in Linton's eyes, just enough. We're finished here, Agatha said. Charles added, You should leave before someone calls the police. Linton smiled. Yes, do that. I would enjoy clarifying matters with them. Roy whispered, We are so doomed. But Linton turned abruptly and stepped back. He paused in the doorway, looking over his shoulder. Mrs. Raisin, Bill truly admired your tenacity. It would be unfortunate if it put you in danger. Agatha stiffened. Is that a threat? Advice, Linton said. Good evening. And he strode away. Charles locked the door at once. Roy collapsed onto the sofa. Agatha stood trembling, but with fury rather than fear. He knows exactly where Bill is, Charles nodded, and he knows we have the evidence. Roy sat bolt upright. So what now? Agatha lifted the cassette, her jaw set. Now we find Bill, and we destroy Linton's little empire before he hurts anyone else. Charles smiled faintly. There's the Aggie I know. She ignored the warmth blooming in her chest. Help me pack everything. We're taking it to Mrs. Blocksby first. I trust her instincts. Roy blinked. Why the vicar's wife? Because, Agatha said, she'll know whether this tape is enough to corner Linton, or whether we need more. Charles nodded. Right then, let's get moving. As Agatha gathered Bill's papers, her gaze drifted to the mantelpiece, a framed photo of Bill at some police fete, grinning awkwardly beside a tray of burnt sausages. The sight stung her heart. Hold on, Bill, she whispered. We're coming. The cottage seemed to sigh in response, as though relieved someone was finally taking charge. Roy sneezed dramatically. Can we leave before I develop allergies to fear? Agatha rolled her eyes but smiled despite herself. Yes, Roy, let's go. The dim lamp on Bill's little side table cast a warm pool of light over her determined face. Charles lounged nearby with theatrical boredom, while Roy hovered like a panicked flamingo. Linton, framed in the doorway with the composure of a man used to rooms bending to him, sighed. Mrs. Raisin, must we make this difficult? I am not here to cause trouble. Liar, Agatha snapped. You've caused nothing but trouble since the day you slithered into Harold Peckham's finances. Charles muttered. Nicely put, then adjusted his stance, arms folded. Roy, meanwhile, pressed himself against the wall as if blending in might save him. Linton stepped forward slightly, palms raised in a show of diplomacy. I simply want to correct a misunderstanding. Nothing more. Agatha barked a laugh. You held Bill captive. I call that quite a misunderstanding. Linton's jaw twitched. He wasn't used to losing ground. Mrs. Raisin, listen. Bill approached me first. He wanted to negotiate turning over the tape quietly. He believed dragging the police into this would harm Iris Selby. He felt responsible for her. Agatha froze. That did sound like Bill, hopelessly earnest, painfully gentle. You're lying, she said, but less forcefully. I'm telling you the truth, Linton replied calmly. Bill met me voluntarily. Several times, in fact. Roy gasped gleefully. Secret meetings, drama. I knew Bill had flair. Roy, Agatha snapped, not now. Charles stepped forward. If Bill met you willingly, why hide the tape? Why vanish? Linton smoothed his coat. Because he changed his mind. At the last moment, he decided the tape was essential evidence. He hid it instead of handing it over. That placed him in danger, not from me, but from someone else entirely. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Then why detain him? I panicked, Linton admitted with maddening frankness. I feared the police would interpret my involvement maliciously. I needed time to clarify matters. Clarify? Agatha repeated. You locked him in a garage. A rented garage in Evesham, Linton corrected gently, as though offering directions to a garden centre. He was safe. I ensured he had water and a heater. Roy slapped a hand over his heart. A heater! Agatha, darling, the generosity. Agatha shot him a glare so sharp he physically recoiled. Charles raised an eyebrow at Linton. Where is he now? Linton hesitated. He was moved yesterday. Agatha straightened, adrenaline burning through her worry. Was moved, she repeated, meaning someone else has him. A flash of annoyance crossed Linton's expression, too quick for most to catch, but Agatha was looking for it. I shouldn't have said that, he murmured. Mrs. Raisin, please. Give me the tape. It is dangerous in the wrong hands. Good thing it's in mine, Agatha retorted. Mrs. Raisin, Linton said with strained patience, your interference has complicated everything. Hand it over, Roy whispered. Oh dear, he's doing the scary spacing between words thing. Agatha held the tape tighter. Her knuckles whitened. She had no intention of giving Linton anything. Not a tape, not a polite farewell, not even the satisfaction of her fear. No, she said, you're not getting this. Not now, not ever. Linton exhaled slowly. Then you leave me no choice. Charles, alert now, shifted his weight. Are you threatening her? I am urging her, Linton corrected. For Bill's sake, he's alive, he needs help, and you're about to make things worse. Agatha's pulse thudded. If Bill is alive, tell me where he is. I can't, Linton said, because I don't know anymore. The room stilled. Even Roy stopped breathing for a moment. What do you mean you don't know? Agatha demanded. Linton ran a hand through his hair, an unexpectedly human gesture. Someone else took him, someone with more authority than I possess. I went to check on him yesterday morning and he was gone, the lock intact, the heater still running, but Bill was not there. Who? Agatha pressed. Linton hesitated. I suspect someone connected to the original financial cover-up, possibly within the police. Roy squeaked. Rogue officers, internal corruption. This is like one of those shows where the detective ends up framed. No one is getting framed, Charles said through gritted teeth, except possibly you. Agatha stepped closer to Linton, tape held at her side. You're telling me someone inside the police knew Bill was investigating the Peckham money? Someone high up, Linton confirmed. Someone who didn't want Peckham's confession heard. Someone who didn't want Iris receiving her share. Someone who realized Bill had evidence and took him. Agatha's stomach clenched. And you expect me to believe you? I expect you to protect that tape, Linton said quietly, because whoever took Bill will come for it next. They may already know he hid it here. Roy whimpered. We're doomed. I should have stayed in London. Agatha pressed her lips together. She hated that Linton's words made sense. She hated even more that his fear seemed genuine. But she would not trust him, not entirely. Charles cleared his throat, stepping forward with dramatic flair. Oh dear, he said in a faint, wobbly voice. I feel terribly, terribly light-headed. Agatha glanced at him sharply. Charles gave the subtlest wink. Then Charles collapsed. Roy screamed, He's dying, and flung himself toward the sofa. Linton jerked back, startled, instinctively moving to assist. Good Lord, what's wrong with him? Agatha reacted instantly. She shoved the tape into her coat pocket, darted around Linton, and bolted for the door. Roy, move, she barked. Roy scrambled after her, shrieking, I can't run in these shoes. Charles, lying on the rug, cracked open an eye. Is it working? He whispered. Move, Agatha yelled again. He sprang up like a resurrected pheasant and shot out the door behind them. Linton shouted, Stop! You don't understand the danger. But Agatha didn't slow. She threw open the cottage gate and sprinted down the lane faster than she'd moved since escaping a rogue WI bake sale disaster in 1998. Charles caught up, panting. Did it work? Please tell me it worked. It worked, Agatha said. Now keep running. Roy was some distance behind, flailing like an inflatable tube man. Wait for me! Agatha didn't wait. She burst onto the small road leading toward Carsely, lungs burning, heart blazing with fury and fear. The tape thumped in her coat pocket, a tiny weight containing the truth, and perhaps Bill's salvation. Charles finally slowed beside her, gasping. Aggie, that was magnificent. Shut up, she snapped, though her voice trembled. We need to get to Mrs. Bloxby. She'll know what to do. Roy staggered up, bent double. My lungs are on fire, my legs are suing for emotional damages. We don't have time for theatrics, Agatha said. Someone else has Bill, someone powerful, someone willing to snatch a policeman to bury a confession. Charles wiped his brow. Do you think Linton was telling the truth? Partially, Agatha said, voice tight. He told the truth because he needed us to believe it, but he also avoided telling us something big. Roy flapped a hand desperately. But at least Bill is alive. He's alive, Agatha said, but in someone else's hands. She stopped walking, suddenly hollow. The lane stretched ahead toward Carsely, peaceful and familiar, a world away from corruption and secret detentions. Bill should be here, visiting the vicarage, having tea with Mrs. Bloxby, dropping by her cottage with that polite knock she pretended to find irritating. Instead, he was somewhere unknown. Charles placed a gentle hand on her elbow. We'll find him. Agatha jerked slightly, unused to the comfort. Yes, she said finally. We will. By the time they reached Agatha's cottage, dusk had pooled softly across the village green, turning windows into warm squares of amber light. A few villagers wandered past, unaware that Carsely's tranquility sat atop a growing storm. Inside her cottage, Agatha flicked on the lamp. Hodge appeared instantly, tail high, demanding attention. Agatha sank onto the sofa, lifting Hodge into her lap. Bill's alive, Hodge, but not safe. Hodge kneaded her leg with solemn commitment. Charles closed the curtains. We should listen to the tape again. There may be something we missed. No, Agatha said, not yet. Linton may have followed us. And if someone else is watching Bill's investigations, they may be watching this cottage too. Roy perched on the armchair, trembling slightly. So what now? Agatha breathed deeply. The cottage smelled of tea, cat fur, and comfort, everything solid in her life. She felt strength return. Now, she said quietly, we plan. We find out who had the power to take Bill from Linton. We follow every clue Peckham left, and we stay one step ahead. Charles smiled faintly. There's the Aggie I know. We can't rely on the police, Agatha continued, not if someone inside is involved. We trust only each other, and Mrs. Bloxby. Roy nodded vigorously. Yes, the vicar's wife is the only truly good person in this village. Agatha stroked Hodge, who purred deeply. Bill left that tape for a reason. He trusted me to finish what he started, and I won't fail him. Charles sat beside her, surprisingly earnest. We're with you, every step. Agatha didn't respond, but her shoulders softened. Outside, the wind rustled the hedges gently. Nothing ominous, just the night settling. But inside, the mystery thickened, the path ahead darkening. Bill was alive, but lost, and someone powerful enough to move him like a pawn now waited in the shadows. Agatha lifted Hodge, pressing her forehead lightly to his. We'll get him back, she whispered. Hodge stretched luxuriously, then curled beside her, tail tapping once in solemn agreement. The kettle clicked on again, cosy, domestic, steady. A false ending, Agatha knew. The real trouble was only beginning. Tranter is lying, Agatha declared, marching toward the Morton-in-Marsh solicitor's offices with the grim focus of a woman who had finally located the true source of her irritation. He lied before, and he's lying now, and I intend to peel him like an onion until the truth falls out. Charles trotted beside her, coat collar up, voice mild. Darling, onions make people cry. Haven't we had enough tears this week? Speak for yourself, Agatha snapped. I am furious, not weepy. She pushed open the heavy front door of Tranter & Company, eliciting the startled squeak of a young receptionist who had plainly been enjoying a peaceful morning. Agatha strode past her without pause. Where is he? Mr. Tranter is in conference, the girl began. Excellent, Agatha said. I adore conferences. They never survive me. She stormed down the hall, Charles following with long, suffering elegance. Tranter's office door was ajar. He sat behind his desk, eyes flickering upward with the speed of a man who sensed an incoming audit. Mrs. Raisin, he said, throat tight, this is unexpected. Good, Agatha said. I prefer catching villains with their hair uncombed. She planted her hands on the desk. Where is Bill Wong? Tranter's face twitched. Mrs. Raisin, I don't— Oh, spare me, she interrupted. You were evasive before, and I let you get away with it because you looked like a man who'd faint at the sight of his own tax returns. But now I'm done being polite. Charles lounged against the filing cabinet with deceptive indolence. I'd answer her if I were you, Tranter. She once threatened a vicar with a spatula. Agatha shot him a glare. One time. Tranter swallowed. His hands trembled as he adjusted his spectacles. Bill is safe. Where? Agatha said. I didn't harm him, Tranter insisted, voice cracking. I simply removed him from the situation. Agatha leaned in. Tranter, if you say one more sentence that sounds like it was written by a guilty but unimaginative novelist, I will climb over this desk and throttle you with your tie. His composure shattered. Linton panicked, he blurted. He came here after Bill went missing. He was terrified Bill would expose us both. Charles's head lifted. Both? Tranter sagged like a deflating sofa. I siphoned funds from the Peckham estate. Not much at first, but it added up. Harold was inattentive. Linton covered for me. When Harold changed his will to include Iris Selby, everything risked coming to light. Linton wanted the will reversed quietly. Bill began asking questions. I thought if I intercepted him, kept him safe, convinced him it was a misunderstanding. You kidnapped him, Agatha said flatly. Temporarily safeguarded him, Tranter corrected weakly. Agatha rolled her eyes. The euphemisms get worse by the minute. Charles stepped forward. Where is he now? Tranter hesitated. Agatha's glare sharpened like a carving knife. In the storage annex, he whispered. Back of the building, old room no one uses. He should be quite comfortable. Agatha moved so fast Charles nearly missed her. If Bill is injured, I will personally arrange for your legal dismemberment. Agatha, Charles murmured. I'm being metaphorical, she snapped. Mostly. They swept out, leaving Tranter collapsing into his chair. Charles guided Agatha through the corridor maze, past shelves of boxed files and the faint scent of musty carpet. At last they reached a metal door. Agatha rattled the knob. Locked. Charles fished a hairpin from his pocket. Always useful. Agatha stared. Why do you... Never mind, just open it. A few deft twists and the lock clicked. Agatha shoved the door wide. Inside, Bill Wong sat on a chair beside a dusty filing cabinet, entirely unharmed, entirely calm, and entirely engrossed in a crossword. He looked up. "Oh, hello, Agatha." Agatha froze. "Hello? That's all you have to say? Hello?" Bill blinked mildly. "I didn't want to worry anyone." Agatha threw her hands up. "You vanished! You left clues! You hid tapes, deeds, notes, umbrellas. You had half the Cotswolds speculating wildly." Bill smiled sheepishly. "Sorry." Agatha opened her mouth to unleash volcanic fury, but found none would come. Relief overwhelmed every possible insult. She stepped forward and gripped his arm. "You idiotic, noble, maddening man." Charles coughed softly. Alive, as promised. Bill stood, wincing slightly from stiffness. "Tranter shouldn't have locked me in here. He panicked when he realized how much I'd uncovered. I told him I'd handle things quietly if he returned the stolen funds, but then Linton got involved." Yes, corrupt men everywhere," Agatha said, waving a hand. "Let's leave before I start appreciating the decor." They guided Bill out, moving swiftly back to the front office. Roy burst in from the corridor, dusted white from head to toe, clutching a container of talcum powder. "Agatha, I'm dusting for fingerprints." Bill blinked. "Why talcum powder?" Roy beamed. "Television." Agatha closed her eyes briefly. "Roy, darling, if I had the energy, I'd scream." Charles patted Roy's shoulder. "Points for enthusiasm." Bill cracked a modest smile. "It actually is nice to see you all." Agatha sniffed. "Of course it is. We're marvellous." They led Bill outside into the bright, sharp morning. Carsley's calm lay miles away, but its atmosphere rushed into Agatha's bones anyway. The sky was crisp, patches of blue chasing off the coolness of the earlier hour. For the first time in days, she felt something like steady ground beneath her feet. "Right," Agatha said briskly. "We need to get Bill home, call Mercester Police, and ensure Tranter and Linton are sitting in matching handcuffs." Charles raised a brow. "You're taking charge, then?" "I've been taking charge all week," she said. "Everyone else has been taking naps." Before Roy could object, a black police saloon swept into the drive. Mrs. Bloxby stepped out from the passenger seat, hands folded politely. Agatha's jaw dropped. "Mrs. Bloxby? What on earth?" The vicar's wife smiled serenely. "I telephoned Inspector Wilkes this morning. I had a feeling today would require official attention." Inspector Wilkes emerged from the driver's side, expression grim. "Mrs. Raisin, Mr. Fraith, Mr. Silver, P.C. Wong. Heard you've been busy." Agatha bristled. "Busy solving the case your force mishandled." Wilkes ignored her. "Where's Tranter?" Agatha jerked a thumb toward the building. "Confessing by now, I should think." Wilkes strode inside with two constables. Mrs. Bloxby approached Bill. "Are you well?" Bill nodded. "Just embarrassed." Agatha snorted. "You should be, making us worry like that." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "Agatha, you have circles under your eyes." "I do not," Charles whispered. "You do." Agatha elbowed him. "Traitor." Roy fluttered his talc-covered sleeve. "If anyone wants to applaud my forensic contributions—" "No," Agatha said. They waited beside the car until Wilkes emerged with Tranter in tow, now visibly paler than milk. Linton followed a moment later, cuffed, muttering protests about misunderstandings, tape misinterpretations, and the mental strain of estate work. Wilkes addressed Agatha. "Good work. Shame you didn't leave it to us." "Oh yes," she said, "because you were doing such an impeccable job." Mrs. Bloxby stepped between them gently. Now, we should all be grateful Bill is safe." Bill smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mrs. Bloxby." Agatha turned to him. "And thank me," he chuckled. "Of course. Thank you, Agatha." She folded her arms but couldn't suppress a small, proud lift of her chin. Wilkes carted off the prisoners, Roy waved like they were celebrities, and Charles leaned against Agatha's car with the air of a man prepared to nap until drama next erupted. Agatha exhaled. "It's over." Bill sighed. "Almost. I still have paperwork." "You'll manage," she said. "Now come home. I need tea, and quiet, and possibly several large sandwiches." Charles opened her car door. "Shall I drive?" "No," Agatha said, shooing him aside. "I want control of something today." They piled in, Roy protesting that talcum powder did not blend well with upholstery. Agatha ignored him and drove them back to Carsely. By the time they reached her cottage, the familiar view of honeystone walls and neat hedges softened her temper. Hodge appeared in the window, tail flicking in a leisurely greeting. Agatha ushered everyone inside. Hodge marched to Bill immediately, sniffed his trousers and gave a gentle headbutt of approval. "Well," Bill said, smiling, "I missed you too." Agatha set the kettle on. The quiet kitchen settled around them, warm and safe. Roy dusted white footprints everywhere. Charles lounged at the table as though he lived there. Mrs. Bloxby, who had followed separately, slipped through the open door with a gentle smile. Agatha poured tea and tried not to look sentimental. "Well," she said, "we saved the blessed Cotswolds again." Mrs. Bloxby touched her arm. "You did very well, Agatha." Agatha muttered, "Yes, well, I'll have to explain the WI auction fiasco next. They'll blame me for something." Bill laughed. "They always do." The kettle sighed again, warm and familiar. Hodge stretched luxuriously on the chair. Agatha Raisin, for the first time in days, allowed herself to breathe. "Bill Wong, you have ruined the auction timetable," declared Mrs. Josephs the moment Bill stepped into the WI hall. "No hello, no sympathy, no welcome back from being mysteriously detained. Just pure administrative indignation." Bill froze like a schoolboy caught near a broken vase. "I'm very sorry," he began. "Sorry won't organize the donated crocheted ponchos," Mrs. Joseph snapped. Agatha swept in behind him like a storm dressed as a woman. "Oh, do stop carping, Joyce. Bill has just returned from an ordeal far more complicated than deciding whether a tea cosy should start at 50 pence. The room fell silent. The assembled WI women, Doris Simpson, Mrs. Mason, Mrs. Timpson, turned to stare. Someone dropped a biscuit tin. Mrs. Bloxby gave Agatha a gentle, approving nod. "Agatha is quite right. Bill has been through a great deal." Bill looked mortified. "It really wasn't," Agatha cut him off. "Bill, kindly stop downplaying everything. It's infuriating." Charles leaned against the wall, arms crossed, wearing the smug expression of a man watching excellent entertainment. Roy stood beside a table of mismatched china, polishing a platter with a gusto that suggested he'd appointed himself auction aesthetic director. Mrs. Josephs cleared her throat. "Well, since you're here now, Bill, perhaps you can explain where you've been." Bill opened his mouth, but Agatha stepped forward. He was assisting with a delicate matter involving estate fraud, inheritance disputes, and one exceptionally unpleasant man in a grey coat. Roy added, "And a garage. Don't forget the garage. Terrible lighting." Agatha shot him a glare that said, "Stop helping." Mrs. Joseph sniffed. Even so, the auction preparations were severely affected. Agatha's patience snapped. "Joyce, unless the auction items attempted to flee the village, I fail to see the connection." Mrs. Bloxby interceded with her calm, church-honey voice. "Ladies, we should be grateful Bill is home safely, and grateful to Agatha, who, once again, followed her instincts." A ripple of murmured agreement passed through the hall. Agatha did not blush. Agatha Raisin did not blush, but she did permit herself the briefest upward tilt of her chin. "Yes, well," she said briskly, "it had to be done." Charles murmured to Bill, "She means she enjoyed it." Agatha heard, "I did not enjoy it. I endured it heroically." Bill laughed softly. "Thank you, Agatha, truly." She stared at him, thrown off balance by sincerity. "Well, someone had to rescue you. You clearly weren't going to rescue yourself." Doris Simpson approached with a clipboard. "Agatha, dear, would you mind sorting the tablecloth donations? You have a better eye for colours." Agatha brightened instantly. "Of course I do." Then catching herself, "I mean, fine, if it helps." The next half hour unfolded in a warm bustle. Women shifted chairs, unpacked donated ornaments, and argued amiably about starting prices. The hall filled with that odd combination of domestic chaos and civic pride that Carsely did better than anywhere. Bill moved through the tasks sheepishly, apologizing every time he passed someone. Most of the ladies forgave him instantly. Bill inspired that sort of trust, but several could not resist informing him precisely how the auction schedule had suffered. Agatha watched, alternating between amusement and proprietary annoyance. No one else was allowed to scold Bill but her. At one point, Bill approached her timidly. "I don't know how to thank you. You risked a lot." Agatha waved him off. "Nonsense, I risked nothing. Charles risked fainting, Roy risked his outfit. You risked losing your reputation entirely." Bill smiled. "Still, I'm grateful." Agatha felt a tiny warmth bloom in her chest, annoyingly pleasant. She turned away quickly. "Yes, well, don't vanish again. It's terribly inconvenient." The WI meeting wrapped at last in a clatter of tins and satisfied murmurs. Mrs. Josephs fussed over revised timetables, Roy showed off a makeshift display he'd fashioned from crates, and Charles flirted with anyone within reach. Agatha stepped out into the mild evening air, lighting a cigarette with the relief of someone finally allowed outside after a long sermon. Smoke curled upward in a thin ribbon. Bill joined her. "You all right?" "Perfectly fine," Agatha said. "Why wouldn't I be?" "You look tired," Agatha bristled. "How dare you?" But his smile was gentle, not mocking. "It means you cared." Agatha inhaled sharply. "I care about efficiency and order, and people not making me chase them through half the county." "Of course," Bill said, amused. She exhaled, flicking ash neatly to the side. "I'm glad you're back," Bill nodded. "Me too." A comfortable, faintly awkward silence settled. The WI hall glowed behind them, warm with laughter and chatter. Agatha stifled any further sincerity by stepping firmly on it. "Right, that's enough emotional nonsense. Go home, rest. Tomorrow we recheck the auction layout." "Yes, Agatha." "And don't apologize again," she added sharply. "Once was enough." He smiled and walked off down the lane, waving. Agatha watched him disappear around the bend. She muttered, "Honestly, vanishing for days. Some people." Back home, Hodge awaited her on the sofa, curled like a small, judgmental cushion. He rose, stretched luxuriously, and settled onto her lap with surprising gentleness. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "I didn't enjoy rescuing him. Not one bit." Hodge purred. Agatha stroked him, annoyed at how soothing it felt. "All right, maybe a little. But he owes me, and I'm not rescuing him again. Not unless he disappears on a day when I have absolutely nothing else to do." Hodge blinked slowly, unconvinced. The kettle clicked in the background, the cottage warm and familiar, Carsely peaceful once more. Agatha sighed, leaning back. "Another mystery solved," she said, naturally. Hodge curled deeper into her lap, purring with smug approval. The night settled around them, cozy and untroubled, for now.